There's a lot of talk right now, with good reason, about grand juries and how they work. We all saw the news that the officers that shot and killed Breonna Taylor were not indicted for anything regarding the murder of Breonna Taylor, and there's a lot of protesting and going on out of outrage that these officers weren't indicted. And I recognize that, and it is outrageous. And I think the important thing to keep in mind is how outrageous our system is. There was a Post and Courier article that came out actually just last month in August that we'll post, that was really great investigative journalism that talked about how grand juries in South Carolina, they end up indicting over 99% of every case that comes before them. Make no mistake that in South Carolina, our system is not better. And in most ways, it's significantly worse than the way it is in Kentucky. So I think it's important to talk to everyone about how grand juries work in specifically South Carolina and what the problems are with them. I've got to be honest, I had to do a good amount of research myself when it came to grand juries in South Carolina. And the reason is because I've never been to a grand jury proceeding. And that's really one of the essences of grand juries. They're very secretive. No one can really see or hear what's going on in South Carolina. Even the prosecutor doesn't know what's going on in them. So grand juries were first enacted in England, actually, in the 12th century. And the idea behind a grand jury was, the goal was to take away all this power from just a small group of government agents, right? The idea being that we would have everyday people, citizens like you and I, that would serve on this jury to decide whether or not there was good reason to actually prosecute someone or bring them to trial if they're accused of something. It sounds great in theory, right? But over the years, in practice, it's become even more of a governmental power, in my opinion. There's actually two different kinds of grand juries in South Carolina. There's a state grand jury, and then there's the local grand juries or county grand juries, which is in each county in the state of South Carolina. State grand juries are not used as often as the local county grand juries, okay? Those are only used really with certain types of cases. Some include, public corruption, election fraud, multi-jurisdictional drug charges, gang crimes, environmental crimes, terrorism, things like that. So your everyday charge, even like murder or, theft or burglary, those things aren't going to go to that state grand jury. Any charge that happens in a county that is not one of those different kinds of charges that's prosecuted by the Attorney General, but ones that are anything that's punishable by more than 30 days in jail, those have to go before a county grand jury, okay? So for example, the case of Breonna Taylor, if that were to have happened in South Carolina, that would have been before the county grand jury most likely. The grand jury is actually better than the county grand jury. And the reason for that is because it is not private in a sense. They actually do record those hearings, and they have a transcript that you can sometimes get of those hearings. The other difference is that's led by the prosecutor or the attorney general in the case of state grand juries. And that attorney general is going to present evidence, can present witnesses that then the jurors can decide on and look at when deciding whether to indict or not. There is no prosecutor that is present for these hearings, okay? It is not recorded. There is no transcript that you can get, and there's no record of what actually happened in those grand jury proceedings. So how does it work in there? What's the purpose of those county or those local grand juries? Well, what happens is there's going to be a police officer or a government agent, investigator that's going to come in, and that officer doesn't necessarily have to know much about the case at all. That officer may not, and most of the time, has not had any firsthand experience in the investigation of this case. Really, in reality, what happens is they're reading really a summary of the allegations to these 18 members of the grand jury. And then those jurors have to decide whether there's probable cause to indict that person in what they call a true bill.